So hey, what's up, everyone? You're currently tuned into the TBD live stream or on KCSB FM 91.9 in Santa Barbara and netnetradio.com out of Tijuana. I'm joined by my friend Wayne Lytalk, and we have Matt Sage from his project Free Dust from his
Hey
home in
everybody.
Chicago. So
Hey everyone.
how have you been holding up during quarantine? What have you been up to? How have you adapted? How do you like virtual gigs? The world has been pretty chaotic the past couple months, especially for those living in the US.
Well, I'm a college teacher, and so all of my teaching has shifted to being online, and
Mm-hmm.
that has presented a bunch of different challenges. Some have been great, and some of them have not been so great. And
Yeah.
so, like, learning how to be, I also teach like studio or creative classes and not just like hard academia. And so
Mm-hmm.
I do some of both. And the studio classes are really hard online, but somehow like the hard academia classes work better online. But
Yeah.
uh, I don't know. So I've been teaching a lot, which means I just like sit. Like it's so weird how to be a teacher right now. You basically are like you become a hardcore podcaster.
Yeah.
It's like I have like a podcast mic that I got because it makes it sound better,
Oh,
and
that's awesome.
I like am just I sit at this like desk 5 days a week
Yeah.
online, which is weird. I don't know. So there's that. We my wife and I are expecting a baby, so we're having like a COVID baby, so that's exciting.
Oh, wow. Congrats.
Congratulations.
Yeah, so that's due in June. Thank you. And we're really excited about that, but it's also very weird having like pregnancy in your house during COVID. Like
Yeah.
we are on like mega lockdown. So there's that.
Oh, yeah.
Uh, I mean, I don't know. I definitely miss people and I miss
Mm-hmm.
places. But I love studio time. And so I've had a lot of time to like record and make music and collaborate with friends. And that's been a thing that I wouldn't have anticipated coming, like have come out of this long term.
Yeah.
But I have had a chance to make so much music and interact with so many people. And that's been really magical.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Streaming gigs are weird, but I also like them because I don't have to like move a bunch of gear, which is
Yeah,
nice. So I
right.
yeah. So that's I don't know. I think like obviously it's a cultural moment fraught with a bunch of turmoil and
Mm-hmm.
stress and fear, but I also think that there's been like a really interesting kind of a lot of the music community has really like solidified even though we're all far apart in a way that has been really magical. As someone
Mm-hmm.
who's been in like the DIY community for a really long time, it somehow feels closer than ever even though we're so far apart from each other. And that's
Yeah.
really me. So,
That's awesome.
yeah.
So, I guess before we get into like the rest of the interview, I want to encourage our listeners to get involved in their community in some capacity as much as possible. And I've been asking artists to choose an organization from the community they feel is important to for our listeners to know about. So, what can you tell me about the Brave Space Alliance?
Okay, so Brave Space Alliance is a Black and trans led LGBTQ plus service system outreach group located on the south and west sides of Chicago, where Black and trans people face systemic oppression, and they're there to offer like housing and support for Black and trans families and LGBTQ families and groups, and in a space like Chicago where it's an incredibly segregated city. Resources are really limited on the south and west side, and so to
Mm.
have like a Black and trans led LGBTQ group focusing their attention in those specific areas is like really amazing. And so
Mm-hmm.
Brave Space Alliance is doing incredible stuff, and I'm really happy to point some people in their direction. It's an amazing group.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for you know, telling our listeners about that. So, how could people get involved if they're in the area, or how can people get involved if they're, from somewhere else in the world?
Yeah, I mean, one of the main things is like Brave Space Alliance runs on donations, and so if you can just throw a few bucks in, or like a recurring donation, like $5 a month, that makes a huge difference.
Mm-hmm.
And I think like finding Black or Black and trans led organizations like Brave Space Alliance in your hometown too, that are like assisting LGBTQ people who face systemic oppression in those areas. Any way that you can get involved, and just like throwing a few bucks that way in your hometown is a magical thing to do right now.
Awesome. Yeah. So, if you're looking for something to get involved in, check out Brave Space Alliance or look for a similar organization in your area.
Totally. Thank you.
You mentioned briefly that you were like a professor or like a teacher.
Yeah.
And yeah, I read on your website that you work at Northeastern Illinois University teaching like media studies. I think it'd be really cool to have a teacher that also makes cool music. So like how and why did you start teaching?
Uh, so I think I figured out that I wanted to become a teacher when I was in high school, and then I went to college because I was like, I have to do that if I want to become a teacher. And then I realized that I never wanted to teach high school when I got to college. And I was like, oh, the thing that I want to teach is like college level. That's kind of what I want to get into.
Yeah.
And the teachers who had like the most profound impacts on me were either art teachers or English teachers. And so I went into the English department and I found like a kinship with several of the poetry professors at the departments that I was in. And so I studied poetry in college. That was like my major was poetry. And then I graduated with my bachelor's degree and was like, okay, that's cool, but I have to get a master's degree to teach college. And I'm like, not ready to do another few years of college right now.
Yeah.
And so I sort of just like washed dishes, and I was also in like punk bands and stuff. And so I like worked in kitchens, and I was a barista, and I went on a few tours. And this is also when I started Patient Sounds, which is like another label. And so so I did that for like 5 years, and then was like, okay, now is the time for me to sort of like figure out what the next move is. So that's when I moved to Chicago to do my graduate degree. And then I got my degree also in writing, but I've always done media stuff. And so then I taught in an English departments in a few small colleges in Chicago for a few years, and then sort of just like tumbled into this media studies program. And I don't know, it's like the most satisfying and fulfilling job I've ever had.
Yeah.
And in being a teacher, it also makes making music a lot more fun because it takes the pressure off of like trying to do it as a job. And instead it's like this just like pure pleasure thing for me.
So like, what's your favorite class that you teach?
So I teach a class called multimedia storytelling. That's really, really fun. And it's like how to tell stories or narratives using audio, video, text, or image.
Yeah.
And so it's sort of about like narrative construction and then how to use that across mediums. I'm really interested with this. There's a guy named Dick Higgins, and he was part of the Black Mountain School of Poets, like way back in the 50s and 60s.
Yeah.
And he has this concept he calls intermedia, where it's like a poem that becomes a song, or like a song that becomes a painting, or letting like multiple formats of media influence each other. And there isn't really like an intermedia studies class at the college I teach at because I'm more on like the media studies department. But that's sort of where I go with my approach is like, how can you turn something that might be a podcast into a short film? Or like, how can you turn something that could be a short film into a podcast? Like, and so students make all sorts of stuff. I love teaching that multimedia storytelling class. I also do intro to audio, and it's a very fun class, just like how to do basic audio production.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so and I do like some cinema classes as well, and some like academic writing for media studies classes, which are more like hardcore academia. But the studio classes are the ones I have the most fun with for sure. Yeah,
that's awesome. Maddie, didn't you study media studies as well?
I did many different degrees at UCSB, and that was one of them. But I was interested in this interdisciplinary focus that you were bringing in, or talking about taking a song, developing it into a podcast or a story or something. And last year on Geographic North, you had one of my favorite pieces on that compilation, Forking Paths.
Yeah.
And when you're putting a song like that together, are you considering a story for it in mind?
Yeah, definitely. That's a really good question. I mean, that's loosely based on that Borges story, Garden of the Forking Paths. Yeah, Jorge Luis Borges. And it's a story about sort of like this garden that you can get lost in. And with those Geographic North compilations, I think there's so many ways that you can approach a Halloween song. And there's like, there's like fun, spooky. And I was on the first, or maybe the
2016.
Yeah, it's like, a few years ago. And I went a little bit more like fun, spooky on that one. And so this one, I wanted to get a little bit more like brooding and sort of like haunted Victorian mansion garden vibe. So
it's like a ghost. It's like you went on a ghost hunt and it went to crap.
That's totally the angle. So that makes me really happy to know that it like is communicating that. And I'm always interested in how instrumental music is this like form of communication, and how even though it's non-linguistic. You do have the song title, which is so important to me. Song titles are so important to me. But then from there, you give someone this like pure like wiggling air abstraction. It's like here's this like here's 3.5 minutes of wiggling air. Maybe it'll tell you a story. So I don't know. I think there's magic in that, and yeah, those Geographic North compilations are so fun.
Oh, they're so fun. Yeah.
I also totally freaked out when I was like, I think the Finesse song is like right before or right
Yes.
after. Like I lost it when I saw that.
Yeah.
I had done a writing piece for Indie Heads on the compilation, really had like spent a lot of time, and the way it's sequenced blew my mind because it's putting like Yi right next to Finesse, and both pieces actually play really well off one another. There's really great flashes there.
Yeah, I freaked out. I mean, obviously Finesse is like a touchstone for the genre that I operate in. And so to like listen to what I made and then have it run into a Finesse track and be like, whoa, that was sort of like one of those moments where I was like, I might have just made it. Like, holy crap. My song sounds good next to Finesse. Yeah. So I don't know. Yeah. Yeah. It's a feeling. Those guys are great too. The Geographic North guys, they really dig in on their projects. So.
They really do. And
they're sweeties.
Yeah, they're awesome.
I didn't know how much went into like all of like the work they do until Maddie's piece. So yeah, Geographic North is honestly really cool.
Yeah, they're amazing dudes.
Oh yeah, I was gonna then ask about Free Dust because outside of this track you've done, you've got 2 other projects though right now that are kind of intermingling or coming out at the same time. And they are not like this Geographic North track. They're very different.
Yeah, I am in this weird moment where a lot of these projects, like, I mean, that Geographic North tape is a little bit different, and I have like something due out with them later this year too. But for now, I'm in it's like a more proper M Sage album. But for right now, I'm in this position where like a lot of stuff that I'd been working on got bottlenecked because of COVID, because like production got slowed down or like things came up in people's lives. And then it all sort of is like all coming out at once, which is sort of like overwhelming. And so Free Dust is the thing that started. There's like a backstory to the project where we moved to Chicago. And when I grew up in Colorado, and that's where we moved here from. And I had like big studio space at our house in Colorado, like a full basement that I could play in. And then when we moved to Chicago, I had like an 8x10, maybe not even that big, like a really tiny little guest bedroom in our tiny little apartment. And so I had to like really strip down my studio gear. And so Free Dust became a way to sort of like make music every day using a very small amount of gear. And so I had like 3 or 4 effect pedals for my electric guitar, and then just like a tape machine, a cassette tape machine. And I started recording on that like almost every day during graduate school. Just like I'd come home and I'd sort of like, I had never lived in a city before. So I felt like there was just like a lot of energy in me, and I was like processing a lot of input. And so I would go into this little room and record these like guitar sort of like, they felt like diary entries to me. And so I was recording these things, and they were just sort of like sitting there on these tapes. And then I was like, well, I could just like start digitizing these and put put 5 or 6 out, or however many would go into like a 40-minute album every few months and see what happens. And so after doing that for a year, I had the material for what would be the archive project, which was like 4 whole albums that came out once a quarter. And so there's a lot of music on that. It's like 160 minutes long or something.
Oh wow,
that's
like, crazy.
Yeah, these like guitar pieces. And so that's sort of where the project started. And then around the time that I was finishing that first round of Free Dust material, I started doing material for what would become Catch a Blessing on Geographic North. And so that one sort of like the Free Dust stuff was like this sort of diaristic, like processing my day with very minimal gear. And then I had been in contact with the Geographic North guys for a long time, and they were like, we should do an LP, because I did a tape for them a long time ago too. Yes. So I was like, you should do an LP for us. And I was like, that's crazy. I'm going to go really hard. So that's sort of when I started doing Catch a Blessing, was like after I finished Free Dust. And then that sort of sat in between, I don't know. So then Free Dust was this project that just sat there, and I didn't really know what it was for, other than knowing it's like about this really small gear setup. And then, I don't know, that came out like 5 years ago, archive, like all that material. Yeah. So then Past Inside the Present reached out, which is another amazing label that like puts out so much great stuff. They reached out and were like, hey, do you want to do an LP? And I was like, I would love to do that, but I can't really do any more M Sage projects right now, but I have this like moniker and I feel like you guys might be into it. And I was like, would you want to do a Free Dust project instead? And they were like, that sounds great. And so it was like a nice way to sort of like bring my cassette recorder out and like brush the dust off it and you know, get it going again. And so that's where that, I don't know, it is. I've always been one of those people where I love coming up with band names, but also just like I feel like a project is a really nice container for an idea musically. And so I don't know. I think it's great when people have several monikers. Yeah. And I definitely am boiled down to basically just these two. The M Sage stuff is definitely much more like studio oriented, and there's a lot of layering and stuff. And then Free Dust is more like diaristic. It's just like me and a little bit of gear, and I just like really I don't know. I don't worry so much about the composition, and I just sort of like get free and get loose. Yeah. And then the quartet stuff is like a whole other story. The like the Fubutsushi and Setsubun stuff is like a whole other. Yeah, that was a whole other beast. Yeah.
That was actually going to be, you know, what we were going to talk about next. So your quartet, it's with Jussel, Primek, yourself, and Patrick Shirishi. So that's ambient jazz, right? That's what you call it, ambient jazz.
Yeah,
I always see you memeing it.
That's also like, it's a joke for sure. But yeah, that's what it is. Yeah.
The meme.
Yeah, those guys are like, okay, so Chris Giselle and I have been making music together for like almost 10 years. And he plays violin on like all of the M Sage recordings basically that have ever been put out. Like he's very prominent on A Singular Continent, which is the first M Sage like album. He plays a lot on Catch a Blessing. We like worked together at a coffee shop like forever ago. And so Chris is very, very dear friend. And then Chaz and I have made a lot of music together. Chaz, who does Lake Mary, we've done a lot of music together in the last 5 or 6 years too. And then sort of like through random connections, I started talking to Patrick, and he plays on some stuff that I'm working on that's not out yet. And so, and like Chaz and Patrick sort of know each other, but it was sort of this thing where I was like sitting at home during COVID thinking like, I'm bored. What if I ask these like 3 really sweet people who like are some of my favorite musicians, like what could happen if we were to all get together and sort of like play music? But we can't get together, so like let's just file swap and see what happens. And I think the 3 of them were also bored, and we're like, let's go for it and see what happens. And within like 3 weeks, we had almost all of Fubutsushi done, and we sort of were like texting each other like, what the hell's going on?
Yeah.
Like, this is crazy stuff. This is not what any of us were expecting. And so yeah, and then after finishing that one, I was like, what if we did one for every season? Wouldn't that be great?
Oh, that'd be so sick. Yeah.
Yeah, and so then, and I really like systems. I really like finding rules or like a way to build something to make material.
Yeah.
Like it gives me sort of like guiding motion or whatever. And so in talking to them and talking about these seasons, they were sort of like, that's a cool way for us to just like keep making a lot of stuff together.
Yeah.
And so we finished Fubutsushi and did not expect the internet to like...
Yeah, they blew up. They absolutely blew up. It's insane. Yeah.
Yeah. And we had no idea that this was going to happen. And it was like this really pure, like, we're just like friends working on this stuff. And like we have like a group text, and like we text each other all day, every day.
Yeah.
We became a little gang, but we have never all been in the same room together.
Yeah.
And what's crazy is like Chris and I have spent a lot of time together, and Chaz and I have spent a lot of time together. Chris and Chaz have met once, but then like none of us have ever been in the same room as Patrick ever.
Yes, that's what Patrick was telling me. Like, I messaged him on Instagram or whatever, and I was just like, Patrick, dude, these records you guys are doing are seriously like so good. And that was like just recently when you guys released, like, I think it's Setsubun.
Yeah, Setsubun.
Setsubun, yeah. And he was like, yeah, thank you. They're all so great, and I'm so glad it clicked. I still haven't met any of them in real life yet.
Yeah, it's so weird. And so it's one of those things where like the fantasy of hanging out together in real life sort of like is keeping the project going, because we keep being like, oh man, like what if we have to play these songs live together one day? Like we should make sure we like are still friends. And like we did a big like a Zoom mixing session where we were on Zoom for like 3.5 hours mixing the Setsubun songs, and
Oh,
it was
wow.
like it's the most we'd ever hung out together, and it was all through Zoom. So I don't know, it's a really magical thing, and it's one of those things where we definitely didn't get into it with any sort of like, it was just like, let's make some stuff. I don't know, we're bored. And
Yeah.
we finished the first one and looked at each other and we're like, holy smokes, let's keep going. So then we did the second one, and now it's like, wow, we just like, we're already almost done with the spring one, and we're really excited about that one
Oh,
too.
wow. Seriously, that's
So,
crazy.
yeah, so I don't know. It's one of those things that just feels sort of like magical. It is been a really great reminder for how like healing and transformative and communal music can be. As someone who has spent like way too much time making music by just like hunching over my laptop with headphones, like in a really like insulate or like isolated internal headspace, like making music by myself, being able to sort of just like fool around a little bit and play and like I don't know, it's been so nice and so therapeutic, and I don't know, it's fun.
Yeah, it's seriously so cool. So how exactly do you guys do that? Do you just like record like a track and then like send it to one person and they're like, okay, I'm gonna build off of this? Like, I don't understand how that works if you're just not like performing as a band like all together, you know?
We don't really know how it works either. It's kind of the crazy part. Often, like I have on Fubutsushi, I recorded like 8 of the piano parts by myself and was like, here's some piano parts.
Yeah.
Go nuts, you guys. And then as they started sort of like layering stuff, like we have a Dropbox and they would like put stuff in, and then people would layer on top of it. And that one happened really organically. And then there were no drums on anything. And then one day I just like laid drums for all the songs and put them all in, and everyone was like, what just happened? And I was like, that's sort of like part of the thing is like we're always surprising each other, like trying stuff.
Yeah.
And then also we're all sort of like leaning back a little bit to make sure that there's room for someone to surprise each other and try stuff. And so it's this really like give or take that happens where we're together, but we're also separate. Like when I'm working on stuff for it, I always am thinking like, oh man, Chaz is going to love this part. Or like, you know, like, oh, I can hear Patrick already like doing crazy arpeggios over this.
Yeah.
Or whatever. Or like I could see like this is the part where Chris is really going to go off and like get really lyrical on the violin or whatever. And so I started a lot of the ones on the first album, and then on Setsubun, Chaz started half of them. So he did a lot of like guitar bass parts, and then I sort of responded to what Chaz put in. But I think like especially for Chaz and I, we are multi-instrumentalists, and we're always building songs ourselves by layering tracks and multi-tracking. So I think, and like Chaz and I have played a lot of music together, and I think we really do speak the same language as far as like chord structures and stuff go. And so I think that we have like a sort of synchronicity between the two of us where we can build songs together because it's sort of like playing with ourselves a little bit, and we're used to that.
Yeah.
And then we sort of leave a lot of space for Chris and Patrick to just sort of go off. Like I sort of see them as the sort of like stars of the band, and Chaz and I are sort of like the backing players. So that's sort of, I don't know, that's how I approach it. I'm sure all 4 of us would have different, or like the other 3 guys would have different answers.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah,
that's awesome. It'd be really interesting to actually like, you know, hear everybody's like different answers too, you know.
I would like to hear those answers too.
Yeah. That's really cool. So that was all for like your new label, Cached Media. So you know, you just started that recently, I believe, right? So what can you tell me about Cached Media? I tell my friends that, you know, I've never seen like a label that's released a CD that looks so good. I think you did a really great job at making like CDs cool again with this label. Like cool. A lot of times I'll see like, you know, a CD release and I'm like, oh dude, I'd rather just get the tape or something, you know? But like, you know, you don't release tapes or, you know, records, or maybe you'd have plans for that in the future. But currently I'm just like, oh wow, like this looks really cool. And like the logo is just like, you know, a little geodata or like a database or something. I do GIS. So like, you know,
you got
like,
it.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, it's just sick, you know? Yeah, so
it's also the layers of a compact disc. There's like paint and information and then paint and then plastic. Yeah.
Oh wow, that's interesting. I totally just like saw like a database logo or something like that.
But it's weird because a CD is basically like it's another hard drive. It's like a disposable hard drive essentially.
That's true. Yeah.
Same thing. Yeah. I really love that she said you're making the CD cool again. Because I did Patient Sounds for 10 years and we put out like 140 tapes or something like that in the 10 years of that label. And the entire time, everyone was just like, oh, you're like one of those cassette labels that's making the cassette cool again.
Yeah.
And now I've like moved to doing the same thing with tapes apparently, or sorry, with CDs apparently. But the main thing for me with Cached is it's sort of born from the same feeling that I really loved doing Patient Sounds, but it became a place where everyone took their solo projects because I feel like everyone has a solo project now, which is rad. And it's like part of how accessible music production software and music production technology are, where everybody has it at home and they can all work on stuff, and it's like amazing, and we can all make solo albums. And I sort of became this channel for everybody to send their solo work, which is really cool. But then I got sort of like tired of
a little pigeonholed, right?
Yeah, right. And like doing it for a really long time was really fun, and it like there was like a community that sort of formed through the process of that label. But after doing it for 10 years, I sort of felt like I was like not doing anything different, and I felt sort of stuck. And so Lynette, my wife, was like, you should take a break and sort of like see what you want to do next after when you shut the label down, because I talked to her a lot about it before I decided to shut Patient Sounds down. And then when I shut it down, I was like, okay, I'm going to take a break. And that was in September. And then I had like ideas for Cached being this sort of more like mixed, like multimedia or intermedia platform where there would be like streaming and short films and books and all these kinds of things.
You listed yourself as the editor-in-chief.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, and like, I always sort of saw it as like it was going to be more sort of like almost like a magazine or like something that you could sort of subscribe to. And then the main thrust of the project for me was like collaboration, though, because that was the part that I felt started to sort of like miss with Patient Sounds, is there wasn't as much like people working together. It was sort of like, I've been slaving over this thing in my bedroom for 2 years. Like, can you put it out on tape? And that's great, but there are a lot of other people who would do that. And I wanted to do something that was more collaboration focused. And so that's where Cash sort of came from, was this idea of like, let's work together and make something that we otherwise wouldn't have made. And like, anytime I approach artists for a project for Cash, it's more like, it's less like, what have you made? And it's more like, make something for this.
Yeah.
So it's less like, Cash is less a receptacle for people's pre-made work and more a sort of like reason to make something. And I see it, it's almost like a game. It's like tag or something.
Yeah.
Like, I invite someone to come play, and then like we figure out what that is going to look like. So I don't know. That's what Cash is about. I also really don't know what it is yet. I'm still like figuring it out every day, and that's part of the fun for me, is being like, I don't know what all this thing does. I know what it doesn't do, and that makes it sort of easy to figure out what's next. But yeah, it's a mystery to me too.
You know, I love that like you were able to find like a workaround, you know, because like I feel like I get stuck in like those pigeonholes all the time, and you know, it's just like I just think that's really cool. Like I've noticed that a lot with like my radio shows as well, because like I've had like a lot in the past, and I'm sure Maddie has like had, you know, many in the past, that like you come up because like you're taught in the very beginning to like come up with like a certain like theme or something that you can like go off of, but then you start to pigeonhole yourself. You know what I'm saying? And,
yeah, totally.
Yeah, so that's really cool that you found a workaround. Like I really love that. So
yeah, me too. It's been really refreshing too. It's like gotten me out of the like introspective solo work bubble that I'd been in for a really long time, and has been like, who can I call next to like make something? What are they going to make? So that's been fun.
Yeah, that's awesome. You know, we've had a couple people on the show that have like mentioned that they're collaborating for like different things for Cash, and like I think that's really, you know, really sick.
Yeah, the community has really it feels like fungal, like it's just like spreading really fast. And so I think it's going to be a really wild few. I don't know how long it's going to last or whatever, but the next like 10-15 months, there's a lot of crazy stuff in the books I'm really excited about. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
So what's behind the label? Like what's behind like the aesthetic? I guess I'm saying.
I am really obsessed with like 1970s like private press magazines.
Yeah.
Like the Whole Earth catalog has been on my mood board for a really long time. I don't know if either of you know about the Whole Earth catalog. It's like a mail order catalog that was started by a bunch of like sort of like aggressive earth focused hippie folks who were like putting together like you could order plans to build a geodesic dome garden house, or like like seed catalogs, or like all this kind of crazy stuff.
That's sick.
It's a really interesting, really bizarre publication, but it has this really specific, beautiful aesthetic that I have been drawn to for a really long time. And so I'm very obsessed with this idea of like these counterculture private presses that were making for a very specific niche, but then when you sort of like go back and look at them, they're absolutely these like aesthetic cultural touchstones. So like that's a big one. I'm also really obsessed with like vintage textbooks, like geology and geography textbooks.
Oh yeah, totally.
Sort of like stuff like that. So that's a big part of it. And then there's also these like small poetry presses who have sort of similar approaches. Also, like Windham Hill is a huge thing for me. I don't know if either of you are familiar with Windham Hill. It's sort of like the pioneering new age label in the U.S.
Okay.
It's like where George Winston put a lot of his music out.
William Ackerman founded one.
Yeah, William Ackerman is part of Windham Hill. Yeah, and so the aesthetic of Windham Hill releases is really specific, and I've always really looked up to that. And so it's sort of like it's like a convergence of all of these things. It's also very much about play and like sort of having fun and maybe being a little bit silly, but not right on the surface. Like it's sort of hiding the silliness. And so I don't know if either of you are familiar with a guy named Glenn O'Brien, and he did a thing called TV Party. Have you heard of that at all?
Wait a second. Glenn O'Brien is in the Things They Carry, Glenn O'Brien?
No, that's Tim O'Brien.
Oh my God. I failed again.
Yeah. Also, but that's a fantastic book though. But no, so Glenn O'Brien was part of like the New York no wave scene in like the 70s in New York, and he was studying to be a journalist or like a communications person at, I believe it was at NYU maybe, and he got access to their public access TV studio on campus at NYU.
Oh wow.
And he basically he started this thing called TV Party, where he just like invited the who's who of the New York no wave and underground art scene onto the set, and then everyone just sort of like hung out together, and in that hanging out together like happenings would happen on screen. So there was like Warhol and Basquiat and like Debbie Harry from Blondie, and like all of these people would be on set like basically partying with Glenn O'Brien, but then it was like broadcasting on public access to all of New York. And so
that's so
I love that energy that he has with sort of like having it be like a no rules, everyone's invited party.
Wow.
And like Twitch, I realized Twitch was my public, like a channel for me to get onto to do this sort of public access approach. And so I started with these Twitch streams, and then was like, well, I know how to put out sound objects, so maybe I'm just going to do these like short run CDs as a way to sort of document these like crossings of channels that are happening. And then this was all sort of like very loosely, I had ideas for all of this, and then COVID hit in March, and I was like, well, I guess if there was a time to start broadcasting on Twitch, like it's now.
So is this the long form stuff that you've been curating?
Yeah, so that was like where long form sort of came from, and long form was like a second stage of an experiment I had tried earlier, where it was like, let's just try broadcasting some stuff and see what it's like to like broadcast audio video on Twitch, whether it's musical or not. And then after doing it, I was like, this is really fun. But a lot of the performers that I was seeing broadcasting on Twitch, whether or not it was live, they were playing for like 20 minutes. And I wondered, like, why are performers feeling like they have to stick to the rules that come with playing in a venue when they're playing at home, or like when you're broadcasting from home? Like, there's no need for you to have to only play 20 minutes if you're playing in your bedroom.
Yeah.
And so as a person who's always made like music that's interested in time, both in slow and fast ways, I was like, it would be really fun to see what would happen if musicians had the space to stretch out in a performance, and to like see what would happen if someone had an hour to play. And so that's sort of where long form started, was being like, what would it look like if I asked some of my favorite musicians to play for an hour in their home studio? Like what would happen. And then after the first one, I was like, okay, I have to do a bunch of these. Like, this is something exciting is happening here. And so I think we did 5 of those in 2020, and it was so fun. And so, or maybe 4, I don't know. It was so fun, and it's also really exhausting to like moderate hour-long streams. And so I don't know if we're going to be doing a lot more of those anytime coming up, but it was sort of like this idea, like, let's do a series, let's see what it's like. Let's do like a few iterations and see what comes up. And so that's where that sort of, and then you'll notice like a lot of the artists that I asked to do long forms are artists who are going to start working on projects. So it sort of was like me being like, hey, come play. And then it was like, hey, that was fun. You want to come over next weekend and make a CD instead? You know, that's sort of the approach.
Yeah, that's awesome. You know, who are some of the people that you've had? Or
so like Patrick did one, Patrick Shirishi, and his long form was like, after he finished his set, I was like, that's like, it was one of the reasons why I was like, I don't really know if I want to do a bunch more of these, because it was just so good that I was like, like, maybe this is done. But that's the one where he played in the parking garage with his saxophone. And it's just him
in that location.
Yeah, the location, and like he is doing this thing where you can tell he's responding to the space he's in, and that space is sort of distorting time. And so we get to watch an artist like negotiate the distortion of time in that performance. And that was like, for me, was like, okay, that's what this was about. Like, way to like slam dunk on all of them, Shirishi, like this is done now. And so Patrick's was like one of my favorites. Ange Francis Wilson, who makes music as T-Sips, their performance was really, really fantastic, and that was the very first one. And so, and it's wild because Ange and Patrick are in a group called Danketsu 10 together, and I put out their CD on Patient Sounds as like one of the very last things that Patient Sounds put out in the last batch. It was Danketsu 9 at that point. So it felt really nice to like bookend that series where Ange started it and Patrick closed it. And then Beth Mcdonald is the tuba player that played, I think, in the second week. And
wow, that's awesome. I didn't see that one.
Beth's just really, really amazing, like sub frequency. If you're gonna listen with headphones, because it's like all low end subwoofer stuff. Beth is really amazing. Claire Rousey did a long form, and
that's sick.
Yeah, Claire's amazing. She like spent the first half like cooking dinner.
That's so sick.
Yeah, and then went from like Claire cooking dinner to her at like a table with some electronics and like drinking some sort of mate, and then like it like collapses in on itself and goes into this really weird dreamscape. I don't know. So Claire's was really wild. And that's another thing, like another person that played was Tal Sounds, Natalie Shammy
from Goodwill Smith.
From Goodwill Smith. And like Tal and I are pretty good buds, and we've done some stuff together. And those sets were in the same long form, and it was really cool for me to see these two artists respond to this invitation in totally different ways, because Tal is like a hardcore improviser performer. Like she really insisted on going, like she didn't want to pre-record. She was like, I have to play live. The set's going to go in live, and I'm like playing from my studio. And I was like, dude, that's sick. Like do whatever you need to do. I'm into it. And then Claire was the exact opposite, where Claire was like, I'm like layering video and I'm doing all sorts of stuff, and I'm going to put it all together into like an hour-long showcase of like maybe 4 or 5 ideas. And to have them like next to each other painted a picture of what streaming, for me at least, like what streaming offers that a venue doesn't offer, where like Tal played for an hour and was like super uninhibited, and sort of like you can see her roam through like 5 or 6 song ideas sort of very loosely. And then Claire, on the other hand, was like collaging audio and video and image. And so, yeah. And I think like I'm expecting to do some stuff with Claire and Tal in like the next year or so as a trio, which I'm really excited about. And then there's other people who like didn't do long forms, but are just people who I've always admired. And it's one of those things where I also didn't necessarily know if playing for an hour was going to be like their mode, which is great. And like Colin Blanton from Bryn is like a great example. like I don't know how Colin could play for an hour with how like is that home screen glow?
Yes.
That one's so good.
So good.
Great.
Yeah, and so like I don't like I'm sure Colin could play for an hour, and I'm sure it would be really wild and psychedelic.
Yeah.
But I also like I'm not sure what that would necessarily. I don't know. It's one of those things where I'm also sort of a curator, and I was like, I'm going to see what Colin would do in another field. So Colin and Mari from More Ease are working on a collaboration, which I'm really excited about. And
that'd be sick.
I was actually Mari was going to do something for a long form that I had planned for this year, but then I found out I was going to have a baby, and my job is like really intense, and so it was one of those where it was like I don't know if I can do another long form series. So I'm actually in the process of like emailing all of the artists that I coordinated doing more streams for, and being like, I can't do that, but like let's think about other stuff. So that's sort of like where this is all headed, I think.
That's awesome. So, you know, Cache Media is literally like so amazing, and we talked like a little bit about like Patient Sounds. Is there anything about like Patient Sounds that you look at that you're just like super proud of, even though you started to get kind of pigeonholed with?
Yeah, I've always called, there's like a crown jewel in that catalog, and it's the Hakobane album, Seamless in Here, that LP. I am a huge, huge fan of Takehiro's music. That's the guy who makes Hakobane, Takehiro Yorifuji. And when I started pressing records, he was like one of the very first people where I was like, I want to put out an LP of your music. And he'd done a lot of tapes, and he'd done like a short run LP before. But when I started doing records, like sort of officially, I was like, I have like a really curveball idea for one. I'm going to do one, and I want you to do one. And so that Hakobane LP Seamless in Here is like a DIY high point for me. It's like one of the things I'm most proud of. I think it's like aesthetically, like the design really matches the music. The music is beautiful. I'm really proud of that one. That's like one of my high points. Also, the album that I did that was mine is that album, A Singular Continent. And that was an album that I worked on for like 2 years, just like sort of in my own zone. There's a lot of collaborators, but a lot of it was just like me in the studio.
Yeah.
And A Singular Continent was one that I had like pitched to other labels, and a few labels like passed on it. And I sort of was like, well, I'm just going to do this myself. I think I could do this myself. And so I got a business loan to do Patient Sounds. And
that's sick.
Yeah. And so like the pitch for doing the part of the business loan, like business plan that I pitched was built around that project, where I was like, I think that I could do this, and I think that it could be like sustainable. And so the loan officer was like, this sounds really crazy, but like the numbers that you're presenting seem solid. So like,
that's sick.
See what you can do. And I like totally freaked out. And then, so like those two LP projects are very high up for me. And as far as like the tapes go, I don't like every tape I loved. It was a thing where it was just a giant adventure, and I loved every project that I did because I got to meet someone, and I got to like talk to them about their work. And I don't know, the tapes there's also so many of them that it's hard to pick favorites with the tapes for sure.
And there's no overstock. I guess the entire catalog is sold out. It's in the wilderness.
Yeah, it's all gone. So, and that was the thing too, like I firmly believe in short run objects. I think there's like a magic in the short run object.
Totally.
And so yeah, it was one of those things where I just absolutely was like, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to like, each one is going to be 100. And then there was just a few specific ones. I guess like a tape that would really stand out to me too is that Food Man tape that I put out.
Oh yeah.
You put out a Food Man tape?
Yeah, I didn't realize that either.
Like, yeah, that Hot Rice tape. And that's one of the few that I did 2 pressings of. So we did like the first pressing of Hot Rice, and it sold out so fast that I was like, holy smokes, okay, I should do a second run of this one. That's one that's like pretty high up on, I guess, like a list of stuff I look back on very proudly. That, and also Lee Noble did a tape on Patient Sounds.
Okay.
Called, oh no, there's so many of them.
Yeah.
It's like right on the tip of my tongue. But Lee's tape is really, really good. And it's like I don't know. Anyway, that's another one where it went so fast that I was sort of like, holy smokes.
Yeah.
But I love Lee's work. I also really like that one because it's both sides of what Lee does. There's like sing songs where he's like playing guitar and singing.
Yeah.
And then there's also like weird, like goosed out, modular, freak out, like ambient stuff. So I don't know. That's another one that I'm really proud of.
That's awesome. So do you like ever, I guess, use some of like the skills and stuff that, or like the knowledge you have from running patient sounds towards like cached media?
Yeah, definitely. And it's also like the patient sounds the scale was way faster and way harder. And I was like doing a lot more projects. And a lot of that was because I had to build it around this business loan and trying to make like monthly loan payments to pay it off. And that sort of set a pace for the label that I eventually just like with becoming a teacher, I couldn't keep up with that.
Yeah.
And so a huge part of it for me, like ending it, was like this pigeonhole aesthetically and creatively. And then also being like, I can't, like, this isn't sustainable. It's fun, but it's not sustainable for me to work this fast or this hard. And so that was one of the reasons why I slowed it down. But I definitely took all of the stuff that I learned from patient sounds and was like, how can I use this to make something that's like a little bit slower and like a little bit more fun and more collaborative and also like lower stakes.
Yeah, exactly.
And getting into it, I never thought what would happen with like Fubutsushi and Setsubun. Like,
yeah.
now I'm overwhelmed again, which is like a good thing to be in, but it's sort of like, oh crap.
Yeah, exactly. I thought I was gonna avoid this.
Yeah, I was like, no one's gonna listen to ECM, like ambient dad jazz, like, and like who buys CDs anymore?
Yeah,
and
right.
I runs out at the run of 100. You're done.
Yeah,
never come.
That's like, yeah. And I was like, I'm just going to make 100 and these are just going to sit forever. And they are like all getting packed up on Tuesday to go out. It's insane.
That's so crazy.
Yeah. I'm like, it's so cool. And I did not see it coming.
The one thing that, in going back when you talked about cash media and the influences, the covers that you're doing, they remind me of Tim Hecker's stuff that he did for Rave Death. It follows that same template pattern, and that also being influenced by 1970s MIT dropping of a piano and old media that never dies and just haunts. But these, again, they go out, they find people, and then they exist in those little corners. But perhaps quickly before we go into a couple fan questions, two of the tapes, or at least one of the tapes that really comes to mind, I think that was, no, I'll give for two, but stuff that you had done with Orange Milk, and then also Tabs Out in 2017. What was the process for both of those tapes? Because they, again, stand very differently from the work that you're at right now. And they're, dare I say, more field recording based, but there's much more of a kind of plunderphonic, glitchy quality.
Yeah, that's a super good question. When I was working with, it's funny because I try to do something different on every album that I'm working on for MSage. I think that there's a lot of artists who I know, like part of getting into their catalog is knowing that every album you're going to listen to by them is going to feel similar. And I love those artists. Like you can put on any Grouper album and I'm going to love it because it's going to sound like Grouper and I'm going to know it's Grouper as soon as like, you know, you get 10 seconds in. Or I don't know, there's so many artists like that, but I am really interested in, I guess like messing up is really interesting to me, like trying stuff and not knowing what I'm getting into. And that's really fun. And so I approach a lot of these projects with the same ideas and the same tools, but I'm trying to do different things with the same ideas and the same tools. And so like I see that the Orange Milk tape you're talking about is rife with typo. And I see rife with typo very much as like a sequel to A Singular Continent, where I used, like in A Singular Continent, there's a lot of like orchestral sounds in that album, but a lot of them came from me sampling records. And so it's like a very plunderphonic album, but then it became very like dreamy and ambient and like landscape oriented. And then I was using like really specific like impressionist conductors or like impressionist composers. So like Ravel and Debussy, like these were the sort of like those who I was taking these samples from. And that was right before I left Colorado and moved to Chicago. So then I moved to Chicago and my life got a lot faster. And so I kind of wanted to do something that reflected that change in my pace. And I also became super obsessed with 1970s muzak. So like the music that was being released by like Reader's Digest, like music for soothing moods or whatever. Like I had these like giant box sets of records that I had found at like estate sales or whatever, or like junk stores. And I was like, I'm going to make an album where I just sampled this stuff.
That's sick.
See what happens. And so then that's where Rifle with Hypo came from, was I was basically just sampling these like Muzak records and then like cutting that up into these sketches that felt more like, more propulsive, or more, I guess I would say like, I don't want to say urban, but they felt more like faster, definitely, maybe like crowded. Like I wanted to do something that was like faster and crowded and like much more rhythmic, where a Singular Continent's very like floaty. And so I see those records being, it's funny because they sound so different from each other, but they are absolutely like friends. They make sense to me. They're like cousins, I guess. And so that's sort of where those two came from. And then the Tabs Out thing, I don't know, does that answer your question about the Orange Milk tape?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. And then with that Tabs Out tape, Max Allison, who is Mux, and it's a split between the two of us. From Hospital Mountain. I like Max is like one of the sweetest people in the world. I love Max. And so Mike Haley from Tabs Out asked me and Max to do a split tape, and Max has this like really hardcore no overdubs vibe. He was like very into like no overdubs.
He also do a live on the spot because he was releasing music like crazy last year and doing that.
Yeah, totally. And so I sort of like took Max's lead, and I was like, M Stage music is always super overdubbed. Like I'm always layering stuff. That's like how it's so different from Free Dust. And so Max was like, I really want to like, I'm gonna do some no overdub stuff for this Has To tape, for this Tabs Out tape. And I was like, that sounds sick. I don't know how to do that super well right now, except for these like electric guitar things, which are not gonna suit the mood. So I'm just gonna like try this and see what happens and go no overdubs. And that's where that Tabs Out tape came from, was me being sort of like Max sort of proposed it, and then I responded to his proposal being like, all right, this is me, no overdubs. Like I got a keyboard, some guitar, like let's see what happens. And that's where that stuff came from.
That's it.
I kind of forgot that tape even existed. So
I was browsing through Discogs, and like I honestly didn't even know that like Tabs Out like put tapes out or anything. So
yeah, I don't know if Mike's still doing that anymore.
I'm writing for him. I'm chilling on the site there occasionally. I was chatting with him this morning. He says you have a great meme game.
Mike said I have a great meme game.
He said solid meme game.
Thanks, Mike. Mike Haley. God, I love that guy and I hate that guy. It's mostly love. He just always calls me when I'm in the bubble bath, and he's always like bothering me, and I don't know how he always knows that I'm in the bath. It's so annoying.
That is so funny. I guess like right before we talk about something else, I wanted to ask, because you mentioned Plunderphonics, was there any like Negative Land influence in that type of stuff?
Okay, so I never got into Negative Land personally, but I had a friend who I played in like a post-punk band with back in Colorado. His name is Eric Wongsvik, and he does music as Wrecked, and I put out a lot of Wrecked tapes on Patient Sounds.
Okay, yeah.
And Eric is like super obsessed with Negative Land, and so he was like, you should check this stuff out. And I'd always sort of been doing something like that, but I didn't know that there was like a whole school of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So then I started checking out Negative Land and was like, oh, like these guys are doing exactly what I'm trying to do, but they're doing it way gnarlier.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh, this is cool. This makes sense that this is what Eric like sees. It makes sense why he suggested this. So yeah, Negative Land was, but it's not like a direct sort of like, oh, I do it, because of that. I mean, I listened to it just a lot of how I got into Plunderphonics was that I listened to a bunch of hip hop when I was younger. Yeah. And then I also was really into like that album by The Books, Lost and Safe.
Oh my god, I'm thinking of a Lemon of Pink and
Lemon of Pink too. I mean,
Thought for Food. Those
Thought for Food. That whole band's catalog was like super formative to me, and it made me realize that you can turn any sound into music, and like finding that, you know, maybe like my senior year of high school, and just like my ears melted out of my brain, and I was like, oh, like this is a different way to approach music. And so like I had this like mash of influences to the side, but then I was also listening to like experimental and avant-garde and ambient stuff, and then was like, oh, like I could do that, but then make this. And so that's sort of where that came from. And then Eric was like, you're basically just doing like pretty Negative Land. And I was like,
I would say at least the idea that you're doing with Rifle with Hypo there, that sounds also a bit like Oval.
Oh yeah,
CDs and just okay, let's see what we got here. We got the glitch. We can make a song off of that.
Totally, and, like the oval, and then also the field. How he was using.
Oh my! I was listening to the first album last night.
Yeah, and that album is so good, and I love that he's using like popular music, but he only uses like this like tiny little sliver of it, and then in repeating that, it becomes its own thing. Those were huge influences. Both Oval and the Field were huge influences in how I was thinking, like, man, these Muzak recordings have really cool sounds in them, but there's also just like so much crap on these records.
Yeah.
And so I want to find these like really small little slivers of gold and then just like repeat those. And so that was definitely how Rife with Typo happened, was like all of those influences, moving into a city, also being in a really small studio space and not being able to like have a lot of gear. I was like, I have a turntable and my laptop and a MIDI controller, like let's party. So, yeah.
That's cool. Fun fact for anybody listening, Wobbly from Negative Land used to be a programmer at KCSB.
Oh, rad.
Way long time ago.
And he has the new tape out on Hosu Mountain.
Oh, really? Wobbly does?
Out right now.
Oh, wow. Oh, dude, that's crazy.
I gotta pick it up now. Crap.
I didn't even put that together. That's the same Wobbly. I thought that was just like an artist name. That's crazy.
Yeah, seriously. Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, we had Negative Land come and like perform a set at. They did like a reunion tour. They came and performed a set at KCSB. And I guess like just the old heads at KCSB have connections with Negative Land. It's kind of sick. That was the first time I learned about Plunderphonics and stuff, is when they're like, yeah, Negative Land's coming through. And I was like, who?
College radio is so rad.
It's so cool. Yeah. Maddie, do you know Irene Moon? What's her?
Yes.
Yeah, dude.
I remember that name.
Yeah, she used to hang out with like People Like Us, another sound collage.
Also cool. That was a great album that we added to the library.
Yeah. Cool. Plunderphonics is awesome. I love that stuff. Anyways, so we're gonna jump into some fan questions that people submitted, and by people I mostly mean Patrick Shirishi.
Oh my god.
Yeah, he submitted all of them this time. So all right, are you ready for them?
Yeah, hit me.
Okay. So our first one is Del Taco or Taco Bell?
Oh, Taco Bell. Cheesy Gordita Crunch is a fast food symphony, in my opinion.
They've got nice vegetarian and vegan options. I'm not gonna.
Dude,
yeah, absolutely.
They took away the potato tacos or whatever, dude.
Yeah, I know the potato tacos were very important to a lot of people. I am not a vegetarian or a vegan, and for me, like, I know a lot of people hate on Taco Bell, but it is a chaotic, neutral fast food experience.
Oh yeah. Taco Bell's dope.
Everyone's like, oh, it makes me sick. Like, no way. I've never gotten sick from Taco Bell.
Same.
It's not good, but it's also not bad.
Yeah, exactly. It's just kind of a go-to when it's around. Sometimes I'm just craving a crunchy taco, a basic.
So good.
Can't go wrong.
And, like, I've had Del Taco. Del Taco's good, but it's not my favorite.
The only pro that I think Del Taco has is that they have like the Beyond Meat or like TVP tacos or whatever.
Okay.
I can get down with that. I do personally feel
potato
like
taco.
Yeah, but the potato taco, I think they're bringing back the potato taco to Taco Bell.
They are coming back.
So
because there was a big backlash when they pulled them.
Oh, definitely. And my girlfriend is vegetarian, so if we go out to eat, we have to choose a vegetarian place, and if it's fast food, then like we'd go to like Taco Bell for the potato tacos, but then we stopped, but now it looks like it's back on the menu, so there we go. So
Taco Bell, that's my answer. Or Taco Bell.
So I think we have one more. Let me pull them up real fast.
That's so funny that Shirishi sent all the questions.
Yeah, it's so funny, dude. I was just like, I opened up my phone and I'm just like, okay, Patrick, hell yeah, dude, thank you.
Yeah.
So he wants to know what kind of pie you like.
Oh. Okay. This is like it's a complicated question because as a kid I hated fruit pie. I was like hardcore like chocolate pie or like pumpkin pie. But as I've gotten older, I've gotten more and more. Like, chocolate pecan is delicious. Like any kind of pecan pie I'm into. But as I've gotten older, I've gotten more into fruit pies. And I've been really into this like apple. I've been making these apple chai spice pies.
Oh, wow. That sounds really good.
And I think my answer right now is like an apple chai spice. In the summer, like a blueberry pie with ice cream is like hard to beat too.
Oh, true.
Or like key lime pie is also really good. I I don't know.
Have
I also wish that I could make like a serious curveball and say like meat pie or whatever,
Oof.
like a savory
Yeah,
pie.
I hear you.
But I'm not gonna say that. I think I'm gonna say this like an apple chai spice pie.
Does anybody know
base.
what mincemeat is? Is that actual meat in a pie?
Okay, so I should know this because I watch a bunch of that Great British Bake Off, but I think it's like it's mushed up. It's fruit. Mincemeat is
Really?
fruit, I think. Yeah.
Huh.
It's like, hold on, let me Google search because I have browser open right here.
Or like,
This is a good question.
yeah.
Mincemeat. Let's see. A mixture of currants, raisins, sugar, apples, citrus peel, spices, and so it does have suet in it, which is like fat,
Okay.
animal fat,
Like
so
a lard or something?
Yeah, it's like lard. Yeah.
Interesting.
Sometimes it has beef or venison. Yeah, that's mincemeat.
So weird. Like, I
Yeah.
just can't, like, why would you have like venison with like some fruit? I guess it's like that sweet and savory thing.
Yeah,
You know.
that sounds delicious to me. I would try
Honestly,
it.
yeah, I feel like I would try it too.
Yeah. I mean, like turkey with cranberry is like that's such a thing.
That's true. Yeah, turkey
Yeah.
with cranberry is a thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my god, it is.
I would try that. Never
That
had
is-
it though.
That is so funny.
Yeah.
Maddie, do you have a favorite pie?
Oh, well, I'd probably go for my friend's chocolate pecan that he would do
Oof.
everything. I mean, just absolutely beyond rich, decadent, a little bit of a butterscotch or caramel flavor in there. That's gonna. Goose Island's, oh god, what is it? Bourbon County Stout on the side. There you go. That's perfect.
That sounds delicious.
That sounds so good. Do cobblers count as pie? I feel like they're basically just pie that are just in a mush, but I've been
It's like deconstructed pie.
yeah, deconstructed pie. I've been Dutch oven cooking recently, so I feel like I would personally go with a Dutch oven cobbler.
What fruit though? I think that's so important with the cobbler.
So when we were in Death Valley, like a month ago or something, me and my girlfriend, like I had just gotten a Dutch oven, and I was like, dude, let's like just make a bunch of stuff, And so we actually forgot a ton of ingredients for the cobbler we were gonna make, and we're just like, dude, so we have this can of apple filling, but we have like no egg or anything. Like, how are we gonna do this? She's like, I think I heard that an egg substitute you can use applesauce. So like we went to like the general store, and all they had were like those like baby food packs of applesauce.
Yeah.
And we didn't have any like cake mix or whatever, like pie crust, whatever you use. And so we're like, dude, let's just like get graham crackers and smash them up and just throw them in and just see
That
what
sounds
happens.
delicious.
Dude, and like, we just winged it, and it turned out pretty good. And like we could hear all the neighbors just like, dude, those people are cooking and it smells really good.
Yeah, that's how you know it's gonna be good. It's
Yeah,
like when you
dude,
got the neighbors
totally.
talking.
Yeah, totally. And it was actually pretty good, and it was just we entirely winged it.
Yeah, I'm a firm believer in that. I know a lot of people who are like hardcore recipe cookers, but I believe the kitchen. I approach the kitchen like a music studio, and it's like anything goes. See what happens. You're gonna mess up some, so like embrace it. But then like when stuff tastes good, you're going to feel like a champion. So
Totally, dude. Totally.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So I think that just about does it for the show. Did you have any last remarks you want to put into the airwaves or archives, and where can people keep up with your projects?
You can keep up with what's happening with Cached at www.cached.media, and that's CACHED.media. My website is matthewjsage.com. And there's all sorts of music and artwork, and you can see pictures of when I didn't mow my lawn for a whole year there too. To see what that looked like. It actually killed my lawn, but that's a whole story. And then I mean, those are the two big ones. There's links to my Bandcamp on all those places too. Thank you a ton for having me. If you're in the Chicago area watching this, go donate to Brave Space Alliance. If you're somewhere else around the world, find a place like that and donate to it, or volunteer your time or your energy to help people deal with systemic oppression. Cook food, mess up.
Yep.
Enjoy it. That's my message.
So we actually have one more question. You may or may not know it if you listen to another interview we've done, but Maddie, hit him with it.
Oh man. All right. Matt Sage.
Yeah.
Rat is coming at you, and it's going to jump in your mouth. There's nothing you can do here. Head or butt.
You say a rat?
A rat.
Head or butt with a rat, and why?
It can be whatever rat you want it to be. Elder Scrolls 4 rat, you got it.
It's going
Wow, this is a really
It's either gonna
Good,
go
horrible question.
head first or butt first into your mouth.
Like with a rat, I don't know if there's much difference between the head and the butt, really.
Yeah, right.
And like I see why you would say butt, because then that way you don't have like biting happening. Because I don't want my tongue like to be bitten by a rat. That sounds awful. But I also really don't want a rat's butthole in my mouth.
True.
So, I think if I had to say one or the other, I think I'm gonna have to go with butt, because I just don't want a rat to bite me in the mouth.
Yeah, that's a super valid option. Butt first for me personally, I feel like would always give me the the access to pet it on its head, calm it down, tame it, make it a ratatouille, put it under my hat, and then we're gonna wing some cooking in the kitchen. You know what I'm saying?
That you get it. Absolutely. Yeah.
So
that's going to live in my nightmares now. So thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
I have some people that answer it like so quickly, and I'm just like, is this something that you think about often? Like, you letting this live like rent free in your head? Like,
yeah. The answer for me definitely is butt.
Oh yeah.
Okay, hold on. Here's a question though. If it's butt, does that mean the whole tail is in my mouth too?
Oh yeah.
It could be.
It could be, yeah. Like,
what if it's like the tail is like hanging out? Because it doesn't make a huge difference, but I really don't want the rat tail to like go down my throat.
Ooh, imagine feeling that thing, just like
wiggling in your windpipe.
Yeah. Ooh, that's brutal.
Yeah, but I'm gonna say butt still. I'm gonna go hard butt there.
Yeah, totally. You don't want a rat head or some rat teeth biting you, dude. What if it was like a New York sewer rat, dude? Like, that's just bad news.
Yeah, Chicago rats are also nothing to mess around with, and they're ghastly. And I would definitely not want one of those faces in my mouth.
Yeah.
Nope.
So I think that's about all we have for today. Thanks
Cool.
for tuning into TBD on KCSB FM 91.9 every Sunday 4 to 6 p.m. and NetNet Radio every Saturday 8 p.m. This is Matt Sage from Free Dust, and I was joined by Maddie, aka Wayne Lytog. Thanks for being on the show, Matt.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Nice to talk to you guys.